It's been a long old time away, but after 189 days, League One football finally returns to the LNER Stadium. Fresh faces, fresh hopes. Michael Appleton's boys are ready to go. And welcome along to Matchday Live, a brand new show that we'll be bringing you before every Lincoln City EFL fixture this season. We'll be hearing from Michael Appleton, a first team squad member, and of course, we'll have the team news for you with the one and only Alan Long live pitchside from the LNER Stadium, right bang on 2 o'clock this afternoon. Delighted, of course, to have your company with us this afternoon, and delighted too to be in the presence of the founder and editor of the StaceyWest.net, coming to us live right from his brand new Sinsel Bank bar. Gary Hutchinson, envious of your surroundings this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sam. It's a nice place to be. I would much rather be at Sinsel Bank, but obviously needs must at the moment.
Well, this is it, isn't it? We're having to get used to this at the moment, as are the players, as are the staff, as are the fans.
Yeah, it's a strange situation, isn't it? I mean, my programme arrived in the post this morning and it seemed odd not picking it up from a programme seller. But it's how we have to enjoy our football, and I'd rather have this than no football at all.
A solid start to the season for the Imps as well. What have you made of them so far?
Yeah, I've been impressed. I think through pre-season, you could see the patterns of play emerging. You could see the sort of method coming through. Competitive fixtures are always a little bit different. I was a little bit concerned when we went away to Crewe. Always a nice football inside. I thought we acquitted ourselves really, really well. The real test comes today. This is serious action, but we've done very well early doors.
And of course, we will be talking about this serious action later on in the show. In terms of summer recruitment, 12 signings made for Michael Appleton. What have you made of some of the faces that he's brought in?
Yeah, it's been a sweeping summer of recruitment, hasn't it? I mean, out with the old and in with the new. I think there's a lot of exciting names and a lot of exciting players that have come in, and there's an awful lot of potential as well. You look at players like Theo Archibald and Remy Howarth, who probably you wouldn't think would be League One starters, but both of them look really exciting. Big signings in Callum Morton and Alex Palmer, and obviously Lewis Monsmer as well. So it's been a really interesting summer in terms of recruitment.
Yeah, we'll be hearing much more from Lewis Monsmer throughout the show and throughout the season, no doubt. But this does now feel like a Michael Appleton side, doesn't it? We know what he did at Oxford and the way that he really sort of ripped everything apart and transformed that squad. Is that something you see that he's beginning to do here as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one point he made when I met him when he first arrived was that we had an awful lot of players on loan, and our star players at the time, Joe Morrell and Tyler Walker, were borrowed. And I think this summer's recruitment has really proven that he wants the exciting players and the key players to be our own players. And that's very reflective of what he did at Oxford. He did lean on the loan market at Oxford. Kamar Roof really springs to mind, who was superb for him on loan from West Brom. And he'll hope for the same from Callum Morton. But he does now have a Michael Appleton feel as well.
Certainly so. Well, last week, as we know, saw a return to competitive action when the Imps took on Crewe at Gresty Road. Here is the best of it. Yes, not a bad start to your Lincoln City career for Lewis Monsma. Gary, that was the finish of a striker, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a footballer's finish, isn't it? And I think that's what we've got in Lewis Monsma. He's a centre half that can really play. We saw a great finish from him, but we've seen some great passes as well, 50-yard balls. As long as he can do the dirty stuff, he's going to be a huge player for this club.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of when Lincoln signed Janos Kovac all those years ago. There seems to be excitement over a foreign defender coming into the club.
Yeah, I mean, obviously in the lower leagues, you don't tend to see as many European imports coming into the club, certainly not at Lincoln City. I think when we first announced it, his age was a slight concern, perhaps. You think, is he going to be a young lad just coming over, struggling to settle? He seems to have settled really quickly, and he's going to stake a serious claim for a first team place.
Yeah, who do you see partnering him long term?
I think long term, probably Adam Jackson. I think that Jackson is another kind of marquee signing for us, playing Scottish Premier League football last year, played Championship football as well. But obviously, don't rule out Joe Walsh because Joe Walsh hasn't come here to sit on the bench. Again, another regular League One player. I can see the three of them rotating in the early exchanges, though, once Walsh is fit, because the games are going to come thick and fast.
Yeah, the fact that we're talking about options in positions like centre-back at this early stage, with everything we've known with COVID-19 and everything like that, it bodes well, doesn't it, going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've mentioned three there, but obviously TJ Ayoma can play at centre-back, Max Melbourne can play at centre-back as well. And that's one thing that the squad's got, is a real feel of fluidity, that players can kind of move into different positions, even further up the field. Eden, George Grant, Anthony Scully, Remy Howarth, they can all play in a new number of positions. And I think that bodes well when inevitable injuries come along, and certainly, again, as I mentioned, fixture congestion.
Yeah, exciting times for Lincoln City, no doubt. Okay, well, you've just seen how the Imps overcame Crewe. Time now to do exactly the same when they beat Scunthorpe at the LNER Stadium earlier this week. Here's the best of the action. I tell you what, Gary, nothing wrong with beating your local rivals on penalties, is it?
No, absolutely not. I mean, even if it's only the EFL trophy, it's always nice to get one over on your local rivals. And penalty shootouts, they get the excitement going, don't they? So it was a good evening.
Talk to me about Alex Palmer, because that's a really strong save he made there. And he comes with a really good reputation as well.
Yeah, definitely. I was watching the clips. He must have been so pleased to have got some leather on his gloves. You know, he made 3 or 4 saves early doors. Okay, they weren't worldies, but they were solid saves, and it was nice for him to be able to get that. And then I think that showed in the second period. He had little to do, but the penalty save obviously was good. It's tough to save a penalty. Josh Vickers, I know, saved one in the last game the last competitive game. But it's massive confidence booster. And I think, Alex is obviously our number one. I think he's going to be a big asset to the club.
Yeah, how much do you think that result midweek could benefit the lads ahead of this game? Because ultimately, you're a penalty save or a penalty miss away from losing that game, and then all of a sudden there's perhaps a tiny bit of pressure going into this one, but of course there's not. That didn't happen, and they've given themselves a real chance in terms of the confidence boost.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a massive confidence boost not to get beat. We should have won the game, let's face it. In the final few minutes there, we were laying siege to the goal. I think another 10 minutes of football, we would have won 2-1. I think there's a big confidence boost for some of the fringe players as well. Players who you may not consider are going to be first teamers. Potentially Harry Anderson, who I thought had a really good game. Howarth and Bradley, both of whom were on the fringes, played well. So I think that in terms of the squad, it was great for the numbers 1 to 23 rather than 1 to 11.
Yeah, certainly so. Well, as I'm sure you all know watching at home, that Michael Appleton is a man that's popular with the Oxford United fans as well, having guided them to a promotion back in 2016. He was giving his pre-match press conference yesterday at the Imps training ground. He was asked, first of all, about injury news.
Well, Joe Walsh won't be fit, and Liam Bridcutt will probably miss out. It's probably a little bit too soon for him. The rest should be there or thereabouts.
Does it feel like this weekend is the real start to the season? Although it's been a great first week and we know what could potentially come in the League Cup, but does this feel like the start for you?
I don't know how to answer it. I can probably only tell you tomorrow. Because obviously, because there's no fans, it's difficult to answer that question. There's no doubt about it. The Crewe game felt different. Obviously, compared to the pre-season game for whatever reason, and maybe just because it was a competitive game of football rather than a friendly, and the players probably felt that. But having said that, from a staff point of view, it was hard to differentiate from Saturday to previous games that we've had because there's been no fans there as well. So fair play to the players. I've just said, look, the reality is there's something on these games, and I think Saturday probably will feel different because there's 3 points available, and that will be the difference. Certainly going into the game, we don't want to be coming away feeling disappointed, and that feeling of when you've lost the game. We haven't had it for a while for obvious reasons because we've all been off. But I think the elation that you get from winning a game, certainly a league game, and getting them 3 points, is hard to replicate. So hopefully we'll get the opportunity to do that on Saturday.
Oxford last season had a really good season. Do you think they've strengthened over the summer?
Well, they lost a lot of players because they had quite a few loan players. Obviously, losing Rob Dickey to QPR was a blow for them. Obviously, he was a good player. But they've done well. The lad Atkinson who's come in. We had a little look in January as well before they took him, but they obviously had a little bit more money power than we did, but fair play. So he's come in and replaced Dickey. The fact that they've been able to get Matty Taylor and sign him on a permanent was a massive one for them. The lad Clare, the right back's a good player. So obviously I think they've put a couple of midfield players that I think is a big part of what they do. That rotation in the middle of the park is something that was good for them last year. Brannigan, he's arguably one of the best midfield players in the league. The reality is, Rob, we're going up against a side that are probably going to finish in the top 3 or 4, and they probably expect that. So it will be a good indication for us to see or have an idea where we're at as a team.
Yeah, Michael Appleton speaking to BBC Radio Lincolnshire's Rob Makepeace there. Gary, I'll start with the injury news, then no Joe Walsh, no Liam Bridcutt. What do you make of that one?
It's a blow for both players, obviously. I think in terms of the starting 11, certainly not having Bridcutt in the side is going to be something that the lads are going to feel. I would imagine that George Grant will probably play centrally, replacing Bridcutt. I think he's got the same ability in terms of being able to spray the ball about. We need our captain back sooner rather than later. What I would say is it's quite heartwarming to see that we're not going to rush players back before they're fit and then cause longer term problems further down the line, which I think may have happened on occasion in the past.
Yeah, interesting hearing what Michael had to say about Oxford United. He said the reality is they're going up against a top 4, top 3, maybe even top 2 League One side here. Do you think they'll have a hangover from losing in the playoffs last season, or is it such a short turnaround that they are one of the favourites again this season?
Well, I certainly think they're one of the favourites. When you look at their squad pound for pound, there's little doubt of that. But in terms of hangover, it's possible. They're notorious slow starters. They haven't started particularly well this season. Their squad's still only coming together. They obviously signed Sam Winnall yesterday, so they still feel that they're adding key players. So I think it's a really good time to play them. But I do think come May, as long as we've played a 46-game season, Oxford United will certainly be in the top 4.
Yeah, I touched on it earlier, but what about Michael and the job that he did at Oxford? Because whenever you listen to the Oxford United podcasts or Oxford United fans talking about him, they do hold him in such high regard, don't they?
They do. I've seen a lot of the 1 to 24 predictions from Oxford fans have got us in the top 2, 3 or 4 based on Michael and based on the fact that he's signing his players. They've seen it all before. Yeah, I think he's a little bit of a legend there, to be honest. He took them to 2 Wembley finals. He got them playing football the right way. I was quite surprised they didn't kick on after he left. The succession plan wasn't quite as solid as it should have been. So we should take heart from that. We should take heart from the fact our manager is held in such high regard by a club that we really, let's face it, aspire to emulate.
Can I ask you about his West Bromwich Albion links as well? Because we've seen with some of the signings that he's been able to make on loan, that this is a manager that has relationships with clubs in various different leagues. We know Oxford, of course, League One, but then West Bromwich Albion and where they are, and of course, assistant manager at Leicester City in the Premier League as well. This is a manager that will be able to pick and choose it a little bit, won't he? Or certainly you'd hope.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, taking the West Brom links first, obviously, that's a major factor in us taking 2 players from them who are incredibly highly rated. It's nice to get loan players that have got senior football behind them, certainly in the Football League. So they were coveted players, and that was, I'm sure, down to Mike. He's obviously a respected man throughout football. The way that he's kind of battled that from injury, the people that he's worked with, reads like a who's who of English football greats to a degree, the likes of even Eric Cantona as well. But, let's also not undervalue the likes of Jez George, who are also involved in kind of promoting the club. Michael is one really positive aspect that we have, but then spread through the wider club, the influence that we have with bigger teams is growing, I think.
Certainly so. Okay, well, the Imps squad may look a little different this season as opposed to what it did this time last season, but one man who's remained is George Grant. He was captain against Crewe Alexandra last week. He's been speaking about what that meant to him.
Massive, obviously. Britters is normally captain. Obviously, at the end of last season, he was as well. So for me to step in sort of pre-season wise and for the first game was massive for me, and really proud to have done that.
You're only 25 years old, but do you feel a bit of responsibility with it being such a young side to lead those younger players?
Yeah, I think so. I think obviously there's not many of us sort of over 25. I think there's only 3 or 4. So for us lads as well with more experience, we need to be helping out the younger lads as much as we can. And I think this year I've taken on a bit more responsibility, especially around the training ground as well and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm really embracing that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Where does the gaffer see you playing in pre-season? Because obviously you've sort of this season you've sort of played down the middle and sort of out wide as well. Where do you think you and him believe your best position is?
I don't know, to be fair. You'll have to ask him. Obviously, I don't mind playing either place. So when I was a youngster, I've always been a centre midfielder. It was only until I went to Notts County on loan that I played wide left, and obviously I had a good couple of seasons there. So I feel comfortable in both positions. So whatever the gaffer needs from me, I'm always ready to give 100%, whether it's in the middle or out wide.
And we're only one of the handful of players that were here when the 6-0 happened last year. Has that been spoken about much between you and the players, or have you kind of let that slide already?
There's only me and Harry, I think, left from that, and maybe Max as well. We haven't spoken about it, but I'm sure we will before the game tomorrow. We've got a meeting this morning, which will probably consist of some sort of stuff like that as well. I haven't forgotten about it for sure, and we definitely won't be letting that happen tomorrow.
Is it a case of sort of seeking revenge almost? But
I don't think it needs to be said like that. it doesn't need to be revenge, but we need to show a better account of ourselves. Definitely need to be better than we was last year in that game, and be mentally stronger to not let that happen this time.
Yeah, so let's start with that then, Gary. He doesn't want to use the term revenge, but it is about appeasing that result, particularly if you played in the game.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just another kind of line of narrative that runs through the fixture alongside Michael's connections. But with the fans, it's something that is really firmly at the front of our mind. I mean, it was an awful afternoon. I actually missed that game, thankfully. And to play in it, I would imagine that it would have left scars as well. So I don't think that the players will want to go into the game thinking like that. They'll want to treat it as a standalone fixture, the opening fixture of a new era. But at the back of the minds of those that were involved, will certainly be an element just wanting to put right a few wrongs.
Yeah, I know George Grant's a player that you really like. You often speak about him on the Stacey West podcast. How important is it to keep hold of players like that?
Yeah, massively at this stage. Look, the long-term method is obviously for us to take players in, develop them and make a small fortune, hopefully to then allow us to develop the football club as a whole. But right now, players like George Grant are hugely important. He's an older head, as he's just alluded to there, which seems odd because it was only a couple of years ago we were talking of him as an exciting youngster while he was at North County and later at Mansfield. I also think that players like George Grant, the fans have still got that connection as well. So certainly this season, he's been really, really important to us.
What about his playing position then? Because I know you mentioned before in the show that you expect him to perhaps play in the Liam Bridcut role today. Do you see him more as a number 10 going forward, left-sided winger? How do you see his best position, and how good is it for Michael and his backroom staff that they've got a player there who is so versatile?
It's hard because every morning I wake up and if I think about George Grant, I think that I prefer him in a different position. I remember it sticks in my mind him playing on the left for Notts County, and he absolutely destroyed us when we lost 4-1 there. And ever since then, it was lodged in my mind. He's a left-sided kind of attacker. But then when he's played what Michael Horton describes as the quarterback role, he's so assured and calm on the ball. It looks like he could be a real good effect there. If we play a 10, and I know we've kind of played a 4-3-3, which is more kind of playing with 3 attackers. If we were to play a 10, he can play there as well. I mean, he's the epitome of flexibility, and he's just so important for the football club. I can't talk about him highly enough.
Yeah, not just his flexibility on the pitch, but so often you see him tweeting about how amazing this club is, how brilliant the fans are. He's one of those players that really understands the culture of a football club and this particular football club as well.
Yeah, he does. I think he's going to be one of the big players in the community when we get back to normal. I think it was a little tough last season. There were so many other players that were kind of big personalities and community faces that some of the newcomers kind of have to edge their way into that role. It's often hard to do it as soon as you rock up at the club. I also think it's important to look at the journey that he's been on. When Michael first came in, obviously George was injured. I think the first game against Bristol Rovers, there was lots of talk of him. Will he stay? Won't he stay? He was pulled off against Wimbledon at half time. And so to go from there to now being one of the players that we're talking about as one of the first names on the team sheet, I think that shows the kind of the emotional attributes and the mental attributes that George has got, which is going to be, again, a big asset to the club.
Yeah, so George Grant extending his stay at Lincoln City. Another man who's done so this week is Jez George. Michael Appleton was asked about that yesterday in his pre-match press conference. Good news all round. This is what he had to say.
Finally, Jez George obviously signing a new contract this week, a bit of a change of job title as well. How crucial has he been during your time at the football club?
Yeah, he's been very helpful for myself, obviously, because it's difficult when you come in as a manager to any football club during the season. The fact that you come into a football club that had so much success over a few years. Things had to change, and things did change, and I think it's been important that Jez has allowed me to do, and I say Jez, but the reality is it's Liam and Clive and the rest of the board have allowed me to make the changes that I believe that will benefit the long-term future of the football club. There's been a lot been said about the budget being reduced by 40%, but that's the world we're living in at the minute, and there's no reason or there's no suggestions that will change in the next 12, 18 months, 2 years. We just don't know. But I think what we have done, and certainly Jez, Liam and Clive have allowed us try and put a squad together that can be hopefully as competitive as we possibly can under those circumstances. So he's definitely helped bridge that gap between myself and the board in terms of trying to get the message and relay my messages back to them.
Yeah, so Gary, good news off the pitch as well, particularly at difficult times for football. How much does it bode well for this club that we're able to keep hold of the likes of Jez George and hopefully build something even more with Lincoln City?
Yeah, I think as I alluded to earlier, it's vastly important to ensure that a football club is strong from the top to the bottom, from the playing staff to the non-playing staff. And it's my understanding that Jez has played a key role, certainly in things like recruitment. He's very experienced with youth football. I think he came through at Cambridge College and he did lots of work with Cambridge's youth setup and lobbying for changes in the rules around youth academies and funding in the National League. So I think he's part businessman, part football man as well. He managed at Cambridge. So I think he's an individual, although the supporters don't always see what he does, he's not always front and centre when it comes to press conferences and media comments. I think he's a really important cog in the machine. Now, normally a director of football would set alarm bells ringing with supporters, but I think the way that it's been done as well, in that he's been at the club, his role has grown, and it's grown kind of along with Michael being here, means that we've got a certain degree of harmony, not just at board level, but also just around the non-playing staff. So I think, again, fans can take heart from that. It might not be the biggest announcement of the summer in fans' eyes, but it's an incredibly important one going forward for the club.
Really generic question one, and probably a fairly easy one for you to answer, but it is just incredible, isn't it, how much this club has built over the past 5 years. It's easy for me to say that sitting here now presenting a Matchday Live show or something, but it really is, isn't it? Because if you go back 5 years, you go back even 7, 8 years, we wouldn't have thought any of this would be possible, would we?
No, absolutely not. And look, I mean, I think it's always important to stress that you go back 6, 7, 8 years, and we're not being critical at all of the setup then. There was a lot of good people doing an awful lot of work, which was overstretching. We were low on numbers. Obviously, we were low on confidence on the field. But when you look at where we are now, for instance, from where we were in the summer of, say, 2016, the change has been phenomenal. Look, success on the field is the catalyst. It always is. You get success on the field, fans come, you've got a little bit of money to spend, but that isn't the be-all and end-all. Cambridge had that when they came out of the National League after their cup run with when they played Manchester United, and they haven't kicked on. So it is a real testament to Clive, to the board of directors, and to the likes of Liam, that we've been able to make those changes and grow as a football.
And the transfer window is, of course, still open. Opportunity there for a few more incomings. I guess the club are not in a position now where they're desperate. There are other clubs out there that just need to get people through the door. Lincoln have a strong starting 11 there. They've got decent substitutes as well if required. So there's not too much pressure on it, but maybe a chance to see some extra faces.
Yeah, I think so. I think that the market is becoming a buyer's market the further we get into the season. There'll be a lot of players out there thinking about dropping wage demands potentially, and that might fit with a mildly restricted budget. Let's not also forget we've only got 3 loan players in at the moment. So if in a week or two's time Michael thinks that the squad might need patching up or a bit of extra cover, he's got the opportunity to go out and borrow players as well. So I don't think the transfer business is finished. I don't think that we'll see an awful lot more either. Absolutely.
Gary, appreciate your time for now. We'll be hearing plenty more from Gary Hutchinson throughout the second half of the show. Hope you're enjoying Matchday Live here. It's all a little bit new. We're trying new things here, so do bear with us. Throughout the season, we want to hear from you. We'll make sure we're embedding your comments into the show. We want to see where you're watching Matchday Live from as well. So please do get in touch. You know the channels that you can get in touch by. It's the club's YouTube, Facebook and Twitter channels. I should say a big thank you to our match sponsors, Selenity, as well. Neil Everett's done a brilliant job with helping build that relationship over the years between the club, Lincoln City, and of course, Selenity. So thanks once again for your sponsorship this afternoon. I believe the time is now 2 o'clock, which means one thing and one thing only. We can cross live over to the LNER Stadium to hear from the one and only Alan Long, who can bring you today's team news. Al, take us away.
Hi, Sam. Thanks very much for that. Well, here's something I've not been able to say for quite some time. Welcome to the LNER Stadium for this afternoon's Sky Bet League One opener against Oxford United. Well, I'm always going to start, as I always do, with the team starting with the Oxford lineup. So in goal is number 1, Simon Eastwood. And we've got number 3, Josh Ruffles. At 5 is Elliot Moore. At 8, Cameron Brannigan. 9, Matty Taylor. Mark Sykes is at 10. 12, Sam Long. 17, James Henry. At 18 is Marcus McGain. 22, Rob Atkinson. And Liam Kelly is at 28. The substitutes for Oxford today are 13, Jack Stevens. Number 2, Sean Clare. Number 14, Anthony Ford. 15, John Massinio. 16, Joel Cooper. At 19 is Daniel Agaye. And at 29 is Derek O.C. York. Right, without further ado, let's have the first lineup of the new season for the Imps. In goal, number 1, Alex Palmer. At number 4, Lewis Montsama. At 5 is Adam Jackson. 8, James Jones. Number 9 is Tom Hopper. In at 10 is George Grant. Anthony Scully is number 11. Number 18, Conor McGrandles. Number 22, TJ Ioma. Harry Anderson is at 26. And number 30, Sean Rowan. On the bench, we've got another Sam Long. This time it's number 31. At 3, Max Melbourne. At 7, Teo Eden. 15, Alex Bradley. 17, Remy Howarth. Callum Morton is at 19. And finally, 25, Zach Elbazedi. Today's ref is Andy Davis. The assistants, Mark Dwyer and Stephen Meredith. And the fourth official is Matthew McGrath. Right, so I think I've got a guest here, pitch side. Liam, in you come, mate. So
Liam Bridcut joins us. Delighted, Liam, to have your company this afternoon. Hope you're well, alongside, of course, Alan Long. Great to hear your dulcet tones back on the airwaves as well, Al. Liam, first of all, congratulations on the new season. Disappointed, of course, not to be involved today, but how excited are you to be a part of this Lincoln City squad going forward?
Yeah, like I said before, very disappointed. Obviously, I can't be out there today. It's been a long time since, obviously, a lot of us have played football. So everyone's dying to get back out there. And the squad, like I said before, is at 100% now. I think the managers and the board and everything else have made some good signings and good decisions over the summer. And we're just desperate to get back playing football.
Yeah, the fans were absolutely delighted when you signed a permanent deal with the Imps. What did that mean to you?
Yeah, for me, it was a decision that was. It didn't take me too long. Like I said, I've had a great loan spell here previously. I've made a great relationship with the manager and the staff and the club and the fans. For me, it was an easy decision. Almost like I had a bit of unfinished business in terms of how the season finished. So I was desperate to get back and try and get the club moving on the right track and where the club should be, really. I think it's got great ambition, the club, and we're all driving to push the club in the right direction.
Appreciate your time this afternoon. We look forward to seeing you throughout the rest of this season. So we'll let you get off and get settled before the game. Al, I'll grab a quick chat with you if I can. As I said before, great to see you back. And how is things at the LNER Stadium? Of course, calling it Central Bank as well.
Well, I've got to say, the LNER Stadium, we must say that. Yeah. Well, first and foremost, it's a lovely sunny day, as you can see. It's a bit weird. Let's not try and kid ourselves. You know, normally at this point, I would have just done the teams. There probably would have been, I don't know, 3,500 people already in, and the 617 boys would be clearing their throats, getting ready. But that's not to be at the moment. We'll be in the future very soon, hopefully. But the staff are all here. The media guys are all here. We're ready to go. The players are here. I'm sure they'll be coming out any minute now, warming up, Sam, for today's game.
Yeah, you're a man that spends a lot of time at the LNER Stadium, of course, when safe to do so. So what is the mood like there at the moment?
I think it's very positive. You know, it's got to be. We've done okay in pre-season on the pitch, which obviously for all of us is the most important thing. We're just glad to be back. You know, we're working very hard behind the scenes to try and get fans back in when it's safe to do so, and when it is safe to do so, that's what we'll do. So we're all very positive here. We're really looking forward to the season, as of course everybody is. Wherever you are in the world, you're watching the game today. This is the exciting day, isn't it? I know Gary be the same. It's the first day of the season, albeit a bit later than normal, and so we're all full of optimism. Of course we are.
Of course we are. Well, we look forward to hearing you say make some noise for the boys later on in this show. We'll be back with you around about 25 past 2. Now we'll let get off. And we'll bring Gary Hutchinson back into the fold because, Gary, I'm going to ask you about the team news then. What do you make of it?
Yeah, it's an interesting lineup, isn't it? I fully expected Max Melbourne to be starting at left back and Sean Rowan's in there. That's massive for the young lad, and I think that's probably the really surprising inclusion. I'm obviously delighted to see Anthony Scully start as well. He's the sort of player that when he gets on the ball, he makes things happen. He's got an air of unpredictability about him. So again, it'd be nice to see how him and Rowan manage to link up down that left-hand side. And obviously George Grant playing in central midfield, as we called earlier.
Yeah, well, as you called earlier, I can't take credit for that, but well done to you. What about going forward then? Because we've not really mentioned Tom Hopper and Callum Morton, but these are exciting times going forward. In this case, Tom Hopper gets the nod.
Yes, yeah, I expected Hopper to get the nod. I think Tom's played most of pre-season, but let's be honest, if you take Burton onwards, he's actually scored quite regularly, 2 or 3 in pre-season, 2 against Burton, 1 against Crewe. He's a poacher, he's a fox in the box. We're hoping that he's sort of settled. But Callum Morton's going to put a lot of pressure on him. It wouldn't surprise me for some matches to see the two of them play together. I think Morton can kind of probably play right or left and could complement Hopper going forward. I still think that there's room for one more, and I know that's perhaps me being greedy. But we've got 2 out-and-out strikers there who I think would be in the starting probably squad of every team in this division.
I thought it was interesting after the Crewe game when Michael Appleton was speaking to Michael Horton on BBC Radio Lincolnshire. Michael said that bringing Callum in probably had quite a positive effect on Tom because he saw perhaps a little bit of extra spice, a little bit of extra energy in his training. And of course, he played really well, Hopper, against Crewe. And then Callum came on and played well as well. But if those two are sort of going at it for that number 9 spot, that does bode well, doesn't it?
Competition for places is key, I think, for any successful team. I would wager that very few of the teams that were promoted last season kind of had the same starting 11 week in, week out. So it is obviously it's good. It's good for Tom to know that there's somebody chomping at his heels. It sets standards as well, and it sets standards with those two battling for the other players. The likes of, and I keep mentioning him, but Remy Howarth, who's kind of coming from nowhere. He sees those two players. He sees the professionalism that they have. He sees the competition, and he knows that he has to raise his game. So it'll have a knock-on effect beyond just the forward too. And if you look at our forward line, it's actually packed from right to left. We've got players, any number of players that could have started. Zach El-Bazedi, for instance, could quite easily have started today and is unlucky to be on the bench. Certainly
so. Let's talk about Oxford United then. And in the meantime, I will ask fans, we're really enjoying it. I can see your comments here. What we're going to do over the course of the season is make sure everything you're saying is integrated into the show. We'll be hearing a lot more from you as well, because at the end of the day, this is your show. So please do get your comments in. One thing I will ask is later on in the show, I want to ask Gary a few questions from yourself. So please do get some questions in for Gary Hutchinson, whether it's about transfers, whether it's about today's team news, whether it's about the club as a whole. Please do get in touch with a few questions for Gary, and I'll put those to him before the end of the show. In the meantime, Gary, thoughts on Oxford then this season? We've mentioned Rob Dickey before. In terms of key players, who are the ones to keep an eye out for today on iFollow?
It's tough, isn't it? You look through that Oxford 11 and you could keep an eye on almost all of their players. I picked out 3 prior to going on air. One of them was Rob Atkinson, who Michael Appleton's already spoken about. In terms of key player, he's probably not one that you would pick out as being functional last season. He didn't play for them. He joined on loan, joined from Eastleigh and then went back on loan. But he's the Rob Dickey replacement. It kind of makes him key because Dickey was massive for them last season. We obviously know all about Rob Dickey as well. So how Rob Atkinson settles is going to be really important for them, especially against a centre forward like Tom Hopper, who I think we could probably fairly describe as robust. But coming from non-league, I think Atkinson will, he'll be more than up to the challenge. If you look at their new signings, they've made so many good signings over the summer. Cameron Brannigan is somebody who I know they're delighted to hold on to. But in terms of new players coming in, Marcus McGuane is one that I think we should be a little bit fearful of. In January, Oxford sold Shandon Baptiste and Tariq Fosu, and they lost a little bit of pace from their attack. Had they kept those 2 players, I believe they'd be a championship side now. They didn't really have an opportunity to replace them. In McGuane, they've got a player who I think they're really excited about. He was a youngster at Arsenal, and he joined Barcelona. He was the first Englishman to play for Barcelona's first team since Gary Lineker. He's since come back to Nottingham Forest and is now on loan, so he's going to add some real pace. Finally, an old campaigner, James Henry. He's probably part of the furniture now at Oxford. He's had 3 or 4 seasons there, I think. He's somebody that I've watched several times while I've been kind of commenting on League One football for various websites. I just like James Henry. I think he's functional, championship quality player, lots of experience, and he'll look to pull the strings for them today.
Yeah, just for those tuning in now, I mentioned it around about the top of the show, but you said on your Stacey West podcast that this might be one of the better times to play Oxford United than perhaps a little later on throughout the season. Why is that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think at the moment Oxford is still in transition. Potentially having the playoffs as late as we did in the year meant that they weren't able to plan as effectively for the future as say we were. So during lockdown, we knew more or less we would be a League One side. They didn't. So for instance, yesterday they signed Sam Winnell. Now Sam Winnell scored regular goals for Scunthorpe United and Barnsley. They had a good spell on loan at Derby as well. Really good striker. But he signed yesterday. It's unlikely that he's going to have that sort of chemistry with the players around him at the moment. 3, 4, 5 games in, I expect him to be scoring goals regularly. And between him and Matty Taylor, they could have 30 or 40 goals there. But they're still just settling into that rhythm, I think. So it is a great time to have them.
Fingers crossed indeed. Gary, great stuff. Let's get to some of your comments then. I'll start with Cornell. I believe it's at Cornell the King, the aptly known Cornell the King. He asks me, actually, he says, do you think we'll be in the playoff spot this season? Cornell, I'm merely the presenter. I'm not the pundit. So my opinion is null and void on this show, I'm afraid. I certainly hope that Lincoln can make the playoffs this season. But great to have you watching the show with us, Cornell. He also says, believe in the mighty Imps and anything is possible for Imps this season. Let's go to James Hoy as well. Charlie, the director, is doing well to keep up with me here. So we will get this right throughout the season. Don't you worry. We'll get there. James says, well done with this show. Very professional. Really appreciate your comments, James. James Lowe below says, come on, the mighty Imps. Jane Craven says, this is the best apart from being in the ground. Well done all involved to getting this up and running. Thank you very much, Jane. Look, we're really appreciating your comments on Matchday Live today. We also appreciate the support of Selenity and Neil Everett and his team as well. Great advocates and great sponsors of this brilliant football club too. And I did say before, please do get your comments in regarding questions to Gary Hutchinson as well, because look, I said before, I'm not the pundit, I'm merely the presenter on this show. Gary's the man that knows both about Oxford United and Lincoln City. He's the one that can give you all the answers. So please do get your comments in on this one. Gary, I'll go back to you. Who haven't we talked about in terms of the starting lineup? Anyone that you want to cast a mention to that you think could be a real threat for the Imps today?
I think looking at the lineup, Conor McGrandles is a player who's probably gone under the radar a little bit in pre-season. Against Salford, it was the first pre-season friendly. Obviously, I thought McGrandles was feeling his way in. But he's one that pundits like Gabriel Sutton, who's obviously a really experienced League One, League Two pundit, was really excited about. He's going to have a lot of work to do today because it's going to be up to him to be tracking the runners from midfield. Oxford are going to be really lively. They're pacey going forward. So working in the centre of midfield, Grandles is going to be somebody who I think can play a key role without particularly standing out. Obviously, James Jones as well. Jones really box-to-box midfielder. And I think with two teams like Oxford and Lincoln that play relatively similar styles, relatively similar setups, the midfield battle is going to be crucial. We've spoke about Grant. Obviously, Jones and McGrandles, two players who have probably yet to show Lincoln City fans what they can do. And it might just be a really good time, particularly for Connor, to put in a solid performance. Good
stuff. We have some comments coming in. We have some questions for you, Gary. The first comment that I can see is from Clive Alfonso. He says, give us a wave, Gaz. Come on, give the fans what they want. Give them a wave.
Clive Nates there. I was worried for a second.
I'm sure Clive was watching as well. Okay, question from Owen Cotton on Facebook says, Gary, do you think that Appleton will make the loan signings permanent players then?
No, I don't think any of the loan players that we've got have an intention of playing in League One in 2 or 3 seasons' time. Perhaps we won't either. Of any of them, I think maybe Alex Palmer, 24 years old. If West Brom remain in the Premier League, whether they will sort of see fit to take him and involve him in their squad, I don't know. Callum Wong's just signed a 4-year deal at West Brom. He's here this season, and then beyond that, it's going on. TJ Ioma, again, I suppose it depends how Spurs go and what they might want from him. But I can't see any of those being permanent signings, not in January or at the end of the season.
Okay, another question, one from Tinkler23 says, at a guess, I think he's watching on Periscope on Twitter. Great to have you with us this afternoon. At a guess, who would Gary say will be the player of the season? Putting you right on the spot before the start of the League One campaign.
Yeah, well, last year I shouted Jack Payne, so this could be a kiss of death, to be honest. A lot depends, doesn't it? A lot depends on who stays fit. Obviously, Liam Bridcut's going to be a massive player for us. Obviously, George Grant is going to be a huge player for us as well. Players who score goals are often up there. Tyler Walker remained with us last season. He may have been in with a shout. So I'm going to go out on a limb. A dark horse for player of the season, if he gets games, could be Anthony Scully.
Okay, great stuff. Let's go to, Tash has got involved and says, great show, but why is Gary in a shed? Tash, Gary's not in any shed. He is in the Sinsel Bank Bar. Where else would you rather watch the game from other than the LNER Stadium? A question from Cy Mills. He says, George Grant is clearly a key player. Is there a chance that he can improve his set-piece deliveries? I mean, look, I've said that I'm merely the presenter here. What I would say is, having watched a lot of league football, having watched Premier League football as well, that set-piece deliveries are easier said than done to get right every time if you look at the statistics in terms of goals being scored directly from a corner. Take it away.
Yeah, I think when you look at some of his set-piece deliveries from last season, Peterborough in the last minute of the game in particular, there's not a lot wrong with them. I think also it depends on what the actual tactic is at a set piece, because it may be that George is being told to hit the near post. He puts the ball into the near post, the defence pick up on it, get it away, and it looks like it's a poor delivery, whereas in actual fact he's only kind of following orders. I actually think George Grant has got arguably one of the best set piece deliveries, certainly in this division. I think if you look at the beginning of last season and certainly overall last season, he had a high number of assists, particularly early doors, but then that was consistent through the season as well. So if there's too much improvement in his set-piece delivery, I actually believe he's going to just stand out more and become more attractive to other teams. So look, George Grant's a great footballer. Keep talking about it. I will keep talking about it on every medium that I can through the season. I think that his set-piece delivery is all right. Sorry, Si.
Do you think that Lewis Monsma could really benefit from having George Grant on set pieces? We've seen how much of a threat he is from corners and well-worked crosses in that game against Crewe, but that could be a little partnership there, couldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, you could probably say the same for Adam Jackson as well. And I think looking back, and at the beginning of the season, you always have to look back over the season before. Looking back last season, it was one area where we were particularly poor. We didn't score an awful lot of goals from corners and from crosses. And our centre-halves didn't really get their head on an awful lot, not being critical of, for instance, Kean Bolger, but for a big lad, he didn't get an awful lot of efforts at goal. Already this season, we've seen Joe Walsh score from a set piece in a friendly. We've seen Lewis Monsma score from a set piece. We've seen Tom Hopper score from a set piece, I think, in a friendly as well. So we're getting the ball into the key areas and scoring goals. If you're getting the right delivery into the likes of Adam Jackson, he's going to hit it with his head. Lewis Monsma's already proven that he's going to pop up as well in key positions. And look, we've not mentioned Harry Anderson as yet on the programme, who obviously gets a start today, which is fantastic for Harry. He's a player that's got a real knack of arriving late in the box. We saw it twice against Scunthorpe, once for his goal, once for a header. He's the sort of player that is also very dangerous at set pieces. Off the top of my head, potentially Rotherham away and Burton away last season. I think he scored from set pieces in both. Hugely important player, but if the delivery's right, the personnel are there to get on the end of the balls, almost certainly.
Okay, let's go to some more of your comments. Steve Haynes, great to hear from you, Steve. Glad you're watching. Glad you're enjoying the show. Gary has been great during lockdown, hasn't he? He's given us a lot of great content to be watching, both on the podcast and the video blogs as well. He says, fancy us to win the game today in Appleton. We trust. Squadron Life, of course, the 617 will be hugely missed at the LNER Stadium, no doubt at all. Which brings me on to a question, actually, a really interesting one from James Bride. James, thanks for getting in touch. You've got in touch via Facebook. He says, will the lack of supporters at the LNER Stadium at Sincil Bank affect us more than some teams? That's a really interesting point, isn't it? Knowing what we know about the atmosphere at the LNER.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, James is old school, he's former Ferret editor, and he probably remembers times when Sincil Bank was 3/4 empty at the end of the 90s. I think that not having supporters in the stadium does work in the favour of certain styles of teams. I think teams that are direct, that are aggressive, that are strong, probably get on better in an empty stadium because they don't thrive on the crowd as much. I think when a team plays nice football, the crowd kind of gasps in anticipation and it lifts the creative players. I think we saw that in the playoffs in Northampton and Wycombe going up, where I believe had fans been in stadiums, don't actually think both of those, if either side would go up, but they could go out, they could do, I'm not going to say spoiling tactics because we've done it ourselves in the past, but they could go out, they could just do their games, no distractions, there's no kind of motivation for the opposition. So I think today, for instance, I think that it probably won't have as much of a bearing on the game. I think had fans been in the stadium, maybe we might have had a little bit of a lift. But then, when we go to Charlton, for instance, it'll be the she'll be on the other foot. So I just think it affects all aspects of the game: the result, the players, the staff. Even now, before match day, not having fans in the stadium, it's just wrong.
Great stuff. Okay, we are nearly running out of time on this show. Just a reminder, the Matchday Live is going to be an hour-long show on the weekends anyway that we'll bring you before every EFL Lincoln City match this season. It's going to be something that's evolving over the season. So to give us a chance to make sure that we get it right. Of course, we want to hear as much from you as possible. And hopefully this is something that we can really take forward and enjoy as a club. I'll get to a couple more of the comments. Andrew Cole. I'm guessing you're not the former Manchester United striker, Andrew Cole. He says, loving the show, very professional, feeling even prouder to be an Imp. Does Gary, like me, think that Hopper will surprise people this season and be a 20-ish goal scorer with multiple assists? Yeah, really good question, Andrew. Thanks for getting in touch.
I think Tom Hopper has the capability to do that. I think when you look at his early spell at Southend, I think he scored 7 in 14 before picking up his injury. I think he's proven that he likes the bits and pieces. He'll pick up on the loose balls in the box if we get the right service in. Yeah, certainly. I can't see why he wouldn't be 20 goals a season. I would be happy if him and Morton between them put 15 each in. But again, as long as we've got goals from all over, even if Tom only gets 10 but lays 10 on, as long as we're scoring goals, it isn't important who gets them.
Gary, final question from me then. Your score and scorer predictions today.
I think it's going to be a tough one today. So I'm actually going to go 1-1. And I know that I get a reputation for being a pessimist. I think 1-1 would be a fantastic result. And looking at the team sheet, I'm going to say Anthony Scully. I would have gone Hopper, but if Scully's in, you never know what that boy's going to do.
Gary, appreciate your time this week. We'll let you get off and settle down to watch the show from the Sincil Bank Bar, your newly built Sincil Bank Bar. As I said at the top of it, very envious of your local surroundings today. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Sam. Cheers.
Okay, so that was the thoughts of Gary Hutchinson. Great to have Gary on the show this week. We are running out of time on this show. We heard earlier from the one and only Alan Long live at the LNER Stadium. Delighted to say we can go back to Al now, who has the all-important Lincoln City team news. Al, take it away.
Hi Sam, welcome back to the LNER Stadium. Yeah, I've got the teams. You can see the guys are warming up behind me. So here we go with today's lineup. In goal number 1, Alex Palmer. At 4, Lewis Montsma. At 5, Adam Jackson. At 8, James Jones. At number 9, Tom Hopper. At number 10, George Grant. Anthony Scully is at number 11. At number 18, Conor McRandles. TJ Owomia is at 22. 26 is Harry Anderson. And 30, Sean Rowan. On the bench for the Imps today, number 31, Sam Long. Number 3, Max Melbourne. Number 7, Teo Aiden. Number 15, Alex Bradley. Number 17, Riley Howard. 19, Callum Morden. And finally, 25, Zach Elbazidi. Right, well, of course, you guys sadly aren't with us today. But I reckon if you all make a lot of noise all in one go, the boys behind me will hear you. So, Sincil Bank, LNER Stadium, let's make some noise for the boys!
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it any better myself. Looking forward to seeing you and hearing your dulcet tones throughout the rest of this EFL season as well. That just about brings us to the end of our very first Match Day Live. Really appreciate your company this afternoon. As I said, we'll be looking forward to hearing from you, Lincoln City fans, throughout the rest of this season. A reminder that you can get your match pass now by going on to www.weareimps.com/ifollow. If you do so now, I believe that you'll be able to hear the BBC Radio Lincolnshire team as well, the likes of Michael Horton, Steve Thompson, bringing you live coverage ahead of that one. So settle down, enjoy the game most importantly, but fingers crossed, here's to 3 points for Lincoln City. Bye for now.